Nobody was truly ready for this moment, even though everyone told themselves they were. For years, fans joked about it, predicted it, even argued over how it would eventually happen. John Cena saying goodbye was always this distant future event, something that belonged to another era, another version of WWE, and then suddenly it wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was real, it was happening. And the shock hit harder than anyone expected. There was no gradual emotional warm-up, no slow acceptance. One moment, Cena was still the constant presence he had always been, the familiar figure who somehow felt permanent in an industry built on change. The next moment, fans were being asked to process the unthinkable, that this chapter was actually ending. Not soon, not eventually. Now, that whiplash is what made the goodbye feel so heavy. For so many people, John Cena wasn't just a wrestler. He was background noise to their lives in the best possible way. He was there during childhood, teenage years, early adulthood. He was the guy you loved, hated, booed, cheered, and eventually respected. His presence became routine, almost comforting, and when something that constant disappears, it creates a strange sense of loss that's hard to immediately explain. That's why the reaction wasn't clean or orderly. It wasn't just sadness or appreciation, it was confusion, disbelief, a quiet refusal to accept what was unfolding in real time. Fans weren't just watching a retirement. They were watching the closing of a personal timeline that had run alongside their own lives for decades. This goodbye wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't supposed to arrive so suddenly, so definitively. And yet here it was, forcing everyone to confront a reality they had avoided for years. An era wasn't fading away anymore. It was ending right in front of them, whether they were ready or not. In that moment, WWE felt different, smaller, quieter, unfamiliar. And fans realized they weren't just saying goodbye to a performer, but to a version of wrestling that shaped who they were and how they fell in love with it forever. The match itself was always going to be remembered, but no one expected it to be remembered like this. Fans went in emotionally prepared for John Cena to lose. That idea had been accepted long before the bell rang. Passing the torch made sense. Putting someone over made sense. What didn't make sense, at least emotionally, was how it happened and what it symbolized in the final seconds of his career. When Cena tapped out, something broke inside the collective mindset of the audience. Not because losing was wrong, but because that loss contradicted everything fans had been taught to believe about him. John Cena was the embodiment of endurance, the man who refused to quit, the guy who survived punishment, fought through impossible odds, and made a career out of resilience. Seeing him give up, even in defeat, felt like watching a rule of wrestling suddenly get rewritten. That's where the discomfort set in. Logically, the decision could be defended. Cena choosing to go out on his back clean is noble. It fits the business logic, it fits the narrative of selflessness. But emotionally, fans weren't operating on logic. They were operating on memory, identity, and expectation. And those three things clashed violently with what they had just witnessed. This is where cognitive dissonance took over. Fans knew Cena was doing the right thing for the company, yet it felt wrong for the character they had invested in for decades. That tension created anger, not because fans felt disrespected intellectually, but because they felt betrayed emotionally. It wasn't about booking anymore. It was about symbolism. In wrestling, finishes matter more than speeches. One image can outweigh 1,000 promos, and the image of Cena tapping out instantly replaced years of highlight reels in the emotional memory of many viewers. Fair or not, that final visual became the punctuation mark on his career, and for some fans, it didn't match the story they believed they had been watching all along. Community outrage followed because fans weren't just reacting individually, they were reacting together. The disbelief fed into itself. Online discussions, crowd noise, and shared frustration turned one moment into a collective reckoning. This wasn't just a match ending. It was the moment fans realized that even legends don't always get the goodbye they imagine, and sometimes one decision can redefine how an entire career feels, even if it doesn't redefine what it truly was. Once the bell rang and the reality settled in, the reaction wasn't uniform at all. Some fans stood frozen, others wiped tears from their faces, and many simply stared in disbelief. For them, this wasn't about wins or losses. It was grief. Years of attachment were collapsing into a single moment, and the emotion poured out instinctively without structure or restraint. But grief didn't stay quiet for long. As the crowd noise shifted, confusion turned into anger, and anger turned into chants. Boos echoed through the arena, not aimed at a wrestler but at the company itself. That's when the divide became clear. Fans weren't just reacting to a match. They were drawing a line between themselves and the people who made the decision. It became fans versus WWE, a tribal response driven by emotional loyalty. Online, that same energy multiplied instantly. Clips of the finish spread within minutes, paired with raw reactions, furious commentary, and disbelief. Dislike counts climbed rapidly, screenshots were shared like evidence, and every number became proof that something had gone wrong. Social proof reinforced outrage. When fans saw thousands of others reacting the same way, their own feelings felt justified, even amplified. What made this moment different was how fast emotion traveled. One angry chant triggered another. One viral clip sparked dozens more. Emotional contagion took over, spreading frustration across platforms and time zones. People who weren't even watching live were pulled into the reaction cycle, experiencing the shock secondhand but just as intensely. At the same time, there were quieter responses that carried just as much weight. Long posts thanking Cena, old photos resurfacing, fans sharing stories about when they first discovered wrestling through him. These tributes existed alongside the fury, creating a strange emotional contradiction. Love and anger weren't competing, they were feeding each other. This wasn't a fanbase turning on a legend. It was a community processing loss together, publicly and in real time. Wrestling fans are used to storylines ending, but they aren't used to constants disappearing. Cena represented stability in an industry defined by chaos. Losing that anchor created emotional whiplash, and the reaction reflected it. In moments like this, outrage becomes a form of connection. Chanting, commenting, disliking, sharing clips all serve the same purpose: belonging. Fans needed to feel seen, heard, and validated in their reaction. And as the noise grew louder, one thing became undeniable. This goodbye didn't just hurt. It unified the WWE Universe in shared shock, shared anger, and shared mourning, proving just how deeply John Cena was woven into the emotional fabric of wrestling. And in that collective reaction, the boundaries between performer and audience blurred completely. Fans weren't consuming entertainment anymore, they were participating in a moment of history. Every chant, post, and reaction became part of the story itself, ensuring that this goodbye wouldn't fade quietly, but would live on as one of the most emotionally charged moments WWE has ever created. Together, fans turned shock into shared memory that will fade. As soon as the shock settled, attention shifted upward, away from the ring and toward the people in charge. In moments like this, fans don't just react to what happened. They search for who to blame. And in modern WWE, that spotlight lands squarely on Triple H, whether fair or not. He represents creative authority, and authority absorbs emotion when things go wrong. This is how scapegoating begins. Fans weren't just upset about the finish, they were upset about how it made them feel. That discomfort needed a target. Triple H became that target because leadership figures are symbols. They stand in for the entire system, the entire machine behind the scenes. When emotions run high, nuance disappears and responsibility becomes simplified. From a logical standpoint, Triple H's explanation made sense. The idea that John Cena chose to go out on his back to elevate the next generation aligns perfectly with wrestling tradition. It respects the business. It honors legacy in a practical way. On paper, it's defensible, even admirable. But fans weren't operating on paper logic. They were operating on emotional truth. That's where the disconnect happened. Triple H spoke in rational terms about doing what's right for the industry and thinking long-term. Fans were still stuck in the moment, processing loss. To them, it felt like leadership was explaining why they shouldn't feel the way they did, instead of acknowledging that they felt it at all. That gap created resentment. Authority conflict thrives in these situations. Fans want to believe the people in charge understand them, that they feel the same things they do. When explanations sound corporate or detached, it reinforces the belief that leadership is out of touch. The sentiment becomes simple and powerful: they don't understand us. Power dynamics amplify this further. Triple H isn't just another voice, he's the final decision maker. So every frustration, every disappointment, every unresolved emotion gets projected onto him. It stops being about one match and becomes about creative direction, trust, and the future of the product. The irony is that Triple H didn't fail logically, he failed emotionally. And in wrestling, emotion outweighs logic every time. Fans don't remember explanations, they remember how moments made them feel. When leadership doesn't meet fans at that emotional level, even the right decision can feel like the wrong one. That's why the blame stuck, not because fans wanted a villain, but because they needed someone to carry the weight of their disappointment. In that moment, Triple H wasn't just a booker. He was the face of a decision that broke an emotional contract between WWE and its audience, and rebuilding that trust will take far more than a press conference explanation. Once the initial anger cooled, the conversation shifted into something deeper and more uncomfortable. Fans began asking the question they didn't want to face: was this actually the wrong goodbye, or was it just not the one they wanted? That distinction matters because it forces a reevaluation of how John Cena's legacy should be judged. For many fans, the ideal ending was clear in their minds: Cena standing tall, Cena overcoming the odds one last time. Or at the very least, Cena losing without surrendering, staying true to the never-give-up image that defined his entire career. That version of events felt morally fair. It felt earned. It matched the memory fans had spent years building and protecting. What they got instead challenged that idealized memory. Cena didn't just lose, he gave in. And while that decision aligns with the man behind the character, it clashed with the myth fans had grown attached to. This is where loss aversion plays a powerful role. Fans weren't just reacting to a match result, they were reacting to the loss of an image they wanted preserved forever. John Cena occupies a unique space in wrestling history. He was controversial, polarizing, and often criticized, yet somehow became indispensable. He outlasted eras, trends, and generational shifts. For some, he was the reason they fell in love with wrestling. For others, he was the villain they loved to hate. But for everyone, he was constant. That's why his goodbye feels so personal. The debate ultimately comes down to how legacy is defined. Is it about logical storytelling, doing the right thing for the future and passing the torch cleanly? Or is it about emotional fulfillment, giving fans the ending that feels right, even if it bends logic? Wrestling exists at the intersection of those two ideas, and Cena's farewell forced fans to choose which mattered more to them. The man John Cena chose humility. He chose to elevate someone else. He chose the business. The myth, however, was built on resilience and defiance. When those two collided, fans felt torn, not angry at Cena, but conflicted about what his final image should be. And that conflict is precisely why Cena's legacy remains unmatched. No other wrestler could generate this level of debate, emotion, and introspection at the end of their career. The very fact that fans are still arguing about whether this goodbye was right proves how deeply invested they were. Legends fade quietly, icons spark debate, myths never truly end. When the dust settles and the emotion fades, WWE is left with a reality it can't avoid. John Cena is gone, and with him goes a role that can't simply be recast. This isn't about replacing a star on the card. It's about replacing an emotional anchor that held generations of fans to the product, and that's where uncertainty begins to creep in. Every era of WWE is defined by a central figure, someone who becomes the emotional reference point for the audience. Cena filled that role longer than anyone expected. He bridged eras, carried the company through transitions, and remained relevant in a way that defied wrestling logic. His departure leaves a vacuum that feels uncomfortably large because it raises a difficult question. Does WWE still know how to create someone like that? There are talented stars on the roster. There are champions, workhorses, and future Hall of Famers, but emotional connection isn't assigned. It's earned over time through consistency, presence, and trust. Cena wasn't just booked strong, he was available, he showed up, he became familiar. In an era of shorter runs and constant change, that kind of stability feels harder to manufacture. This is where fear of decline enters the conversation. Fans worry that Cena represented the last of something, the last truly universal babyface, the last figure who transcended storylines and became part of people's lives. Whether that fear is justified or not, it's real, and perception matters as much as reality in wrestling. At the same time, there is cautious hope. Every era eventually produces its own icons, even when it feels impossible in the moment. New stars rise, narratives shift, and connections form in unexpected ways. WWE has reinvented itself before, often when fans were convinced it couldn't. That tension between skepticism and optimism defines this moment. This goodbye also signals a leadership transition in how WWE tells its stories. Without Cena as a safety net, creative decisions carry more risk. There's no familiar figure to stabilize reactions when things go wrong. The company is being forced to stand on its current roster and its long-term vision alone. For many fans, this feels like the end of innocence, a reminder that nothing in wrestling is permanent, not even the figures that once felt untouchable. The future of WWE will move forward, but it will do so without one of its most reliable constants. Whether that future feels exciting or unsettling depends on how the company navigates this crossroads. What's clear is that the Cena era is over, and what comes next will define WWE for years to come. This moment will be remembered not because everyone agreed with it, but because everyone felt it. Shock, anger, sadness, and debate collided into a single emotional storm, and that intensity is the clearest proof of John Cena's importance. Moments that truly matter don't pass quietly, they disrupt. They linger, they demand to be talked about long after the lights go down. What fans experienced wasn't just disappointment, it was meaning being created in real time. Wrestling thrives on memory, and this goodbye carved itself into the collective consciousness of the WWE Universe. Years from now, people won't just recall the match. They'll remember where they were, how they felt, and who they argued with about it. That's how you know something mattered. The outrage wasn't disrespect. The sadness wasn't weakness. Both were expressions of gratitude, even if they didn't look like it in the moment. Fans reacted so strongly because John Cena gave them something rare: consistency in a world built on constant change. He became a shared reference point, a familiar presence across generations, and losing that feels personal. Over time, the sharp edges of this goodbye will soften. Anger will fade into reflection, and debate will turn into appreciation. What will remain is the understanding that WWE witnessed something extraordinary. Careers end all the time, but eras rarely close with this much emotional weight. This was never going to be an easy farewell because icons don't leave cleanly. They leave echoes. John Cena's final chapter sparked conversation, conflict, and connection, and that is exactly why it will never be forgotten. WWE may create new stars, new champions, and new eras, but moments like this cannot be replicated. They happen once, shape a generation, and remind fans why they fell in love with wrestling in the first place forever.